Greetings, Goshen family, friends. How are you? I hope you're doing great. This is a great day today. I am in great company with a young man. I haven't even asked your age, but I don't think I have to. People will recognize you. But for some of those that don't, I have the company of Benjamin Rogers. Benjamin, welcome to the Goshen Chronicles Forum.
Well, thanks for having me here. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while now, and thanks for having me in your studio. This is a beautiful studio, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing here for the community.
Oh, no, thank you. And it's our pleasure. We have been telling everyone that we want to make sure that the community gets together.
Yep.
We want to make sure that our side of the demographic group, which is Hispanic, bicultural, bilingual, we come to the table and have good conversations. And today we have really good conversations. Before we came on air, we were going at different subjects that are hot for some people, but nonetheless, somebody has to talk about those things. And so today I have the honor to have you here. And the goal for us today is that people know who you are. Quite honestly, before the forum, before we went to the theater, that was on the 21st, I believe, I didn't know who you were. And then I started searching a little bit about you, and you're a very interesting person. So tell us a little bit of your background. Were you born here? You know, did you grow up here in Goshen?
Yeah.
You're running for mayor on the Republican Party, which go ahead and tell us.
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Rogers, and I'm 28 years old. I'll be 29 in a couple of weeks.
Very young.
Yeah, just a bit. I'm holding on to that young label for as long as possible. Let me put it that way, because the aches and pains and stuff with age are starting to get there. And I'm like, okay, in the next couple of years, I'm not sure if I'll be able to hold on to that young label for much longer. But I was born in Korea.
Okay.
I was born in South Korea, and I was there for only a few months before I was adopted to a family here in Goshen.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I tell people I've lived in Goshen my entire conscious life. So all my memories and all my foundations are here in the community. Grew up in a more on the west side of town, and it's been wonderful. The community has done a lot for me. I say that the community really has formed like who I am. And for that reason, I'm running for mayor. I feel like we have a responsibility to take responsibility onto ourselves and try to give back to the community and into the country. And in this way, that's how I feel I can serve in that capacity.
That is awesome. So did you go to Goshen High School here? Or
Yeah, I was actually homeschooled. And then
homeschool. That's great.
I actually went to the community college over in South Bend for a degree in visual communication, because growing up I was like, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do right off the bat. And as I got closer to 18, like, okay, I have to pick a career or pick something to go towards. I decided, well, let's try the media route. So I went to Ivy Tech, got a degree in visual communications, worked for the PBS station over in South Bend, WNIT Public Television. Worked there for several years, and that was one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had.
What did you do there? What part of the? I mean, it's all
basically
fun.
Everything.
Really?
It was great. I started off, being a camera op, did some floor directing, ran the teleprompter, all the random stuff.
Nice.
Got to do a lot of directing, a lot of technical directing, and then got to do the old master control stuff. At the time I worked there, this was kind of neat. They still use the old tapes.
Wow.
No one used tapes anymore.
Right.
They were the only station in the area that still used the old style equipment. So I got to experience. I was probably one of the last generations to stick a tape in, hit play, and pray that it didn't break on the air. The instant I left there, they replaced all the equipment. So I came back in to visit. I'm like, what's all this stuff? This is all new. Like, they're like, yeah, the instant you left, we replaced everything.
Oh, wow.
But really enjoyed that. Got to actually do some producing as well over there. A lot of technical producing on some of the shows. And after that, I ended up going to a lot of small businesses in the area, working internally with their marketing, their media work, helping to grow them in the community. And about 2.5 years ago at this point, I went independent, started my own firm, Skyflare Visual Media. So I've been in business for myself for the last several years, and that's been been a challenge, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been very rewarding to
Very
try to
good.
build something both for yourself and to serve others in the area. So
That's awesome. Are you married? Do you have any children? Or?
no, it's just me and the cat.
Okay. What's your cat's name?
His name is Kimi. He's named after Kimi Räikkönen, the Finnish Formula One race car driver.
Oh yeah. Okay, good.
So it's just me and the cat right now. And in terms of like family relationships, my parents still live in the area, still live in the town. My sister lives over in Mishawaka. She works at the at Beacon as a trauma nurse. And my brother is getting ready for his next step in his career after graduating college. So it's been all the family still in the area at the moment. And I think one blessing with me still being, single at the moment, still working on that, by the way, is that I have a lot of time available to commit myself to some kind of service. And that did play into my decision in running for this office.
Before we came on air, we were talking about different subjects, political history, and talking about, again, subjects that are considered to be a little hot for some people, but you seem very knowledgeable in politics. You didn't go to school for that, but you have good knowledge. Where did that come from?
A lot of that came from being kind of a sponge when it came to politics. And one of the first presidential elections I remember following was back in 2008, and I would have been too young to vote at that point. But I remember really following that closely and realizing, hey, this is something that I'm interested in. My father is an elected official. He's currently a county commissioner on the county level of government. And so when he first ran for office, when I was younger, that's something I followed fairly closely, but it wasn't something I really wanted to jump into at that point. It was just something I was like, oh, this is interesting. And as I continued involvement, I realized that locally, you look at the national political scene and it's very divisive and it feels like it's very hard to get into.
It is, yeah.
But locally, it's pretty easy. If you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're a Libertarian, whatever, you can find your county chairman's phone number on the web, call him or her up, say, hey, I want to get involved. And they'll plug you in immediately. And that's kind of just what happened is during high school, I'd show up and volunteer for campaigns. I just started trying to learn how the system worked and why it mattered. Because there's a lot of things in politics that just don't matter at all.
Yeah.
It's a lot of political fluff, but then you'll find things where you're like, okay, this matters. This actually improves someone's life. This gets the government out of the way. And just over the years, it's been something I've watched, and I realized that local elections, local politics is where you can actually make the difference. Because I, as an individual, heck, even if I got elected as mayor, I wouldn't be able to call up, Congress and say, hey, you need to fix this problem. Unfortunately, it has gotten very divisive. It's gotten very spread out. People are in their own camps. But locally, you can still make a massive difference. You know who your mayor is down at City Hall. You can walk in and ask to speak with them. Same thing with the county government. Same thing with the state government. It's local and it's right in front of you. And that's one thing that I really took away from my political involvement, whether it was volunteering for campaigns, running a few campaigns, and now running myself, is that local elections is what matters, because that's where you can make the difference.
Yeah. Let's talk about government, because even to define the role of government, I think it even, you could say, divides the camps.
Yep.
What do you think is the role of government? What do you think should be, or it is?
Well, I think the role of government's really laid out in the Constitution. And, the states created a federal government to unify the country and to take care of things like, national defense, certain infrastructure that was broader than an individual state. So then you get down to the state level and you're like, okay, where does that fall? And, the 9th and 10th Amendments are pretty clear that basically everything that's not delegated to the federal government goes to the states. You then start going down the line and you realize that a lot of the stuff that we think of government as doing isn't even done by the states. It's done by your city. It's done by your county. It's done by the people that literally live down the street from you. Yeah. So in terms of the role of government, it's really varied. But I feel like most of the involvement that government should have in our lives should be local. But even when you have that, government isn't there to force ideas on you. It's not there to force an ideology on you. it's not there to even necessarily create jobs. Like sometimes you'll hear politicians,
Right.
you know, take credit for like, oh, I'm going to create jobs. It's there to get out of the way. It's there to facilitate and create infrastructure to allow for that to happen.
Create the
And
environment, right?
exactly. Create a welcome and open environment that doesn't favor people politically, doesn't favor people by their ideology or what they look like. It's there to create a platform. And then it's up to the community and the people to take that and do something with it. It's not necessarily the government's role to come in, run people's lives, tell them what to do, or even run their business. And I think we need to be careful sometimes, because it can be easy to be like, well, we don't like this, so the government should fix it. But at the end of the day, government's force, and you don't want to overuse that. And I think that's something we have to be very careful with when we balance that out in the community.
Yeah, that's good. So what drove you to jump into politics? I mean, we all have reasons and motives for the things that we do. What is in your heart? What is it that got you into, I'm going to do this? Because it has been a journey for you,
It
right?
has. I was raised in an environment where I think service to others was expected, whether that was through scouting or my church or the family. It was just something that you did. You were supposed to serve others, help other people. And that was just normal. That wasn't something that you did to like, so you could list it on a resume or whatever. It was like, that's just how you were supposed to live your life. And that was how I was raised. And I think that kind of through osmosis affected how I view government and politics. And as I kept on volunteering for campaigns and showing up to stuff, I realized at some point I kind of have to put my money where my mouth was, because, you know, it's very easy to complain like, oh, I don't like what this office holder was doing. I don't like what this person's doing. I realized at some point there would be an opportunity where I'd have to either say, I'm going to try to help, or I'm going to just get out of the way. And in terms of this mayoral run, I am the ballot replacement candidate for someone. The previous nominee had to resign due to personal reasons. Nothing bad or anything like that. He had some stuff going on with his business he had to take care of, and he understood that they wouldn't have the time to commit to both. So the ballot position opened up on the Republican side, and I remember complaining like, we need to find somebody. We need to find somebody to do this. I wonder who it's going to be. They better be good at this. And then someone asked me, well, why don't you look at it? And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. And I remember specifically thinking to myself, that's really neat that they asked me. And it's kind of an ego stroke. Like, that feels good. And that was one of the reasons I initially said no, like unequivocally no, because I didn't want it to be something where, oh, someone mentioned this to me and that made me feel good, so I'm going to do it. And then someone else mentioned it and we're like, hey, would you look at this? And I'm like, no. And they're like, just look at it. Will you promise me you'll look at it and consider it? And I'm like, okay, I can at least do that. And so I remember going home, praying about it, talking with people, running the numbers, and really doing a deep dive on what the role of the mayor really is in the community. And I realized that I can do the job. And
what do you think the role of a mayor is in a community?
The role of the mayor is, I remember at one of the scout meetings after I announced I was running because I'm still an assistant scoutmaster of the Boy Scout troop down in New Paris. One of the younger scouts came up to me and they're like, what is a mayor? And I'm like, well, that's a really good question, isn't it? And you realize that a lot of times voters, ask that, like, what is a mayor? And you have to think about that for a second, because it's a position you hear about a lot, but you're like, what is it? And basically the role of the mayor is to be the chief executive of the city government. On the county level, you'll have, the police department's under an elected sheriff.
Yeah.
The highway department is under an elected board of commissioners. The auditor handles some stuff. You have an elected treasurer. You have all these positions. And on the city level, you have two elected executive positions. You have the mayor and the city clerk treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
And the mayor oversees your streets, oversees the police department, oversees the fire service, oversees the parks department. All these different facets of the city are overseen by the chief executive. And a lot of the issues that people deal with, whether it's zoning issues or the customer service they're receiving from a city department, the buck stops at the mayor's office. And that's something that for a long time I think has needed some adjustment. I'm not the kind of person to go in and say we need to throw out everything and restart. I'm not one to upend the apple cart without reason, but there are things to look at from a different perspective that I realized that I could do. So the mayor's job is to be the chief executive, is to oversee all the city departments and the execution of the budget, and that's something that for a long time I think has needed new eyes. And I think I'm able to provide that for the citizens.
You would be a candidate of the Republican Party, which in Goshen, I don't know how long it's been since Goshen has had a
It's been a while.
Republican mayor.
Mhm.
It has been a while, you said.
It's been at least 30 plus years. I believe
Wow.
Max Chittister was the last Republican mayor. And before him, there was another Republican by the name of Ralph Shank. And I actually, one of my first memories in Goshen was meeting him, because my dad mowed his yard for him when he
Oh,
was
really?
when he got older. And I remember I would have only been a couple years old going over to meet him. And it wasn't until probably, I would say, when I was, probably about 10 years ago, I realized that was the mayor. But it's like he would have been one of the last Republicans as well. But you're right. Goshen has been a Democrat-controlled city administration through the mayor's office, but the council's been Republican. So there has been a split. And
do you think that's beneficial for?
I think it can be.
Okay.
I think the working relationship recently has been really good. I know it had at times had gotten contentious, and I think the previous administration, especially under Jeremy Stutzman, helped calm that back down and brought a lot more people together. I would say that it is an uphill battle running as a Republican, because there's preconceived notions when you put a party next to your name.
Yeah.
But my goal is to break down barriers. My goal is to go in and try to build coalitions. And I believe I have a message that resonates beyond just the stereotypical Republican with an R next to the name.
Yeah. And when we look at the national level,
Mhm.
the political stage at the national level, we can highlight the bigger differences, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to our community, most of those things, I believe, come to values, come
Yep.
to how we look at the simple things of life, family, work,
Family.
your neighbor, how we treat
Mhm.
each other. And for the mayoral position, how you communicate with the rest of the team that has
Agreed.
been there for a while, right?
Agreed. Yeah, coming in, I understand, the current, bureaucracy, and I don't mean that in an insulting way, but like the government structure in the administration has been there for a while. And, in my talking with some members of the administration, I want to make clear, I understand kind of the political stuff around it. It's like I have been very careful not to put city employees in a position where it's like, hey, I want to talk about what's going on. I want to know, like, what's wrong in your department so I can, use it against your boss. I want to make it clear my goal is to never put the city employees in that kind of a position. And I think one of the things I understand is that you have to be able to go in and work with people. And there's people in there that you may disagree with politically, but they have the expertise and they know how to run the show. And you have to be able to work with them in order to get the result that you were elected to provide. And so coalition building is very important. And I know as a leader, you can't just go in and start, saying you're going to do it this way or else. You have to be able to work with them and understand where they're coming from. And they have to be able to do the same with any new mayor that comes in. My opponent that I'm running against, she is currently the mayor. But at the same time, she was appointed after the previous mayor resigned, take another position only a few months ago.
Yeah.
So no matter what, come January, we will have a new mayor that everyone will have to learn to work with. And my hope is, whether it's me or her, that transition is a smooth one. And I know from my experience and my knowledge of local government is that the executive coming in can't just go in and say, I'm the new boss and you're going to do it exactly how I want you to do.
That would create shock for sure.
Because it would create, you're right, a big shock to the system, and it would create animosity where there doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And I have a deep respect, and maybe it's an outdated old school respect for the idea of civil service. There's people there that have dedicated their lives to providing clean water, good streets, and good public services to the community for a long time.
Yeah.
And they deserve that respect from their leader, from their elected representative, because I'm there to represent them too. A lot of them live in the city and they vote.
Yeah.
And I'm as much their representative as their elected boss.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big balance that you have to be able to strike for whoever is elected to the position.
Yeah. Our Goshen community is very diverse.
It is.
Unfortunately, on the Hispanic side, I'm
Mhm.
Hispanic. I was
Mhm.
just telling you my story. I'm an immigrant of 30 years. I've been here in 30 years. There's not much engagement from the Hispanic community when it comes to voting. We interviewed Diego Morales, Secretary of State.
Yep.
He came here to Goshen, and I was telling him, you know who put you in the office? It wasn't Hispanics for sure, but we have seen that people are more. I'm going to say the Anglo community have been more receptive to the minorities, and I think right now on the Hispanic side, we are at that point where we need to start creating more consciousness on. We need to get involved into the voting, into our democracy. We have many second generation
Yep.
immigrants. Those are the children of the people that came here as immigrants that are able to vote now. They are able to exercise that right, but they're not engaged. And I think it's in part because they might not know how important it is to practice that at the local level. But also maybe there's not enough excitement into the what's happening here, how things work. And so our goal at the Goshen Chronicles is to let people know how things work. I'm figuring some things out myself. It's a new type of government, and so things move quite differently. What do you think about inclusivity? This word that we talked about.
Yeah,
that is being used a lot.
Yeah, the word inclusivity, to me, that means being tolerant of everyone's ideas, everyone's backgrounds. It doesn't matter what you look like. You're a human being, and to me, that's the biggest thing. Treat everyone as an individual. Treat everybody as a person that's worthy of respect. And I think sometimes, we have to make sure that doesn't necessarily mean like a one-track thought, because there's going to be diversity of thought. There's going to be diversity of opinions. And as you well know, even on, in any group that people try to put into one lane, there's a ton of different divides within that. And you have to be careful not to, quash those differences. And I think, to me, it means respecting everyone as a human being. And that's what true inclusivity and diversity is you have diversity of opinion, you have diversity of thought, and diversity of reason. And that is important.
Yeah. Very good. What do you think are going to be some of the challenges that Goshen will be facing in the next calendar year, the next budget year?
Yeah. That's it's not a loaded question, but it's a long question, because there is a lot of things that aren't negative. And that's kind of the thing that has been interesting in both this campaign and previous, is when you ask certain people, like, what are the issues? It can be tempting to be like, well, everything's perfect, because a lot of things in Goshen really are doing quite well, especially when you compare us to other communities, throughout our region. We are, as the county seat of Elkhart County, we're doing quite well. But there are things that we can improve on, and that's not a negative, that's a positive. We can move forward with things. We're dealing with a lot of traffic issues, because Goshen is now almost 35,000 people. We have doubled in a lot of people's lifetimes. Our city has doubled in size, and I don't think the infrastructure has necessarily kept up with that. Some of that comes down to communication, in regards to like how we network with the county's road system, how we network with the state's road system, and vice versa. And I know there's been some friction when it comes to some of that communication. That's something I'd want to try to clean the slate on and try to improve that, because anyone who commutes in and out of Goshen, especially if they have to go by the high school, the
that's a
33
bottleneck
bypass,
right there. Yeah,
it's a mess. It's an absolute mess, and it makes people not want to drive through the city, and that affects businesses. It affects if people want to live here. So it is a crucial thing, especially as we're looking at more housing developments. The Cherry Creek development that's supposed to go in near Waterford Crossing to the south of us, that could add 1,600 housing units in one subdivision.
Oh my goodness.
And currently, there is not a easy way to get them from the south side of town to the north side of town that doesn't throw them into that bottleneck. So that's something we're going to have to look at very heavily. There's been a lot of talk about bike paths and almost like second tier or next tier pedestrian infrastructure. My concern goes a bit deeper, as I've been campaigning, especially in some of our neighborhoods I feel like maybe have been forgotten about when it comes to the current political system. the basic sidewalk systems are gone. They were there at one point, but they've decayed to the point where they're not usable. So that's been something that's been brought up a lot. A lot of our basic road and pedestrian infrastructure needs to look at. There's been a lot of discussion about affordable housing. We don't have a lot of development coming in compared to what we possibly could have. And that's been one thing that I think I've been most struck by, is in talking to developers, talking to real estate professionals, talking to engineers, is that Goshen has a reputation of that needs to be restored when it comes to business friendliness. And I think that's not even necessarily a personnel issue, that's a policy issue. And that's a lot of that's under the purview of the mayor. And so we need to be able to explore ways that we can streamline and modernize the process. If a new business wants to move to town, if a business wants to expand in town, there's a lot of red tape they have to go through, to the point where I know some of them have considered, well, maybe we want to grow in Elkhart, maybe we want to grow in the county, and that destroys the tax base that we have here in the city.
Yeah.
And that affects the housing issue, because then we don't have as many developers fighting for development projects in the city. That affects the jobs issue, because we don't have as many businesses expanding and growing and coming to the city. And to me, a lot of the things that people talk about are tied to that development issue. And to me, that's, if I could just flip one switch and try to improve, it would be that, make Goshen as business friendly and community friendly as possible, because that will help solve many of the issues that people are dealing with on an everyday basis. There's other issues involving, personnel issues, like, for example, as the city grows, how many more police officers do we need? Do we need more firefighters? There's, discussions about a new fire station to the south of town, especially as the city expands. There's a lot of almost inside baseball issues that the city's dealing with that will affect the citizens and the residents of Goshen very, very soon. And to me, it's all tied together. A lot of it is all tied together, and whoever is elected in November is going to have to deal with all those issues and be willing to pound the pavement, have the discussions, and quite honestly, make some tough calls when it comes to where to put our resources, because fortunately or unfortunately, city government has limited resources.
Right.
And so my goal would be to make sure that all the meat and potatoes issues are taken care of first, because that's what I think the majority of citizens want. They want to make sure they have good roads, a good place to live, and a good place to work. And then you can start working on the, what I would call the second tier infrastructure. But until we have everything else, taken care of, we need to make sure that the basics are taken care of first and foremost.
That's great. Well, Benjamin, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you even before we came on air.
Same here.
You are very talented. You have a good knowledge, I can tell, history.
Working on it.
That's very good. And so, is there a web page that you have that, if people want to know a little more about you, do you have community gatherings everywhere, every once in a while, or how do you do your campaign right
Definitely. We've been doing a lot of door-to-door, a lot of going out and talking to people, a lot of candidate forums, and there's a lot more of those coming up. We have some meet and greets that are actually coming up as well in the 3rd district of Goshen with me and one of the councilmen up there. And that's you can find a lot of that information on my website, rogersforgoshen.com. And also, if you look on Facebook, I have a very active Facebook page as well under, I believe, Benjamin Rogers for Mayor. So if you look on both Facebook and the web, we have a lot of stuff there. Feel free to reach out. My actual phone number and email is on the website and the Facebook page. Always happy to hear from people, because a lot of these issues that I talk about, these aren't my personal issues. These are the issues that the community's brought to me. I remember the instant I announced my campaign, I had people the next day reaching out, hey, we're dealing with this. We're dealing with this. Can you talk about this? So a lot of this has been driven by what the community wants and what the community is dealing with. And to me, that's been incredibly helpful, knowing what people are, want to hear talked about, want to hear dealt with. And so that community outreach and that community back and forth is very important. So I look forward to hearing from anybody and everybody as this campaign continues.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Benjamin Rogers, candidate for mayor in Goshen, and you can follow us on Facebook. Please share these videos so that the people that live here in Goshen can learn about Benjamin and his story and his plans for Goshen. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the like button so that the algorithm share this information with everybody else. Again, I am Miguel Santiago. Extremely delighted today to have you. And we hope that everybody has a great evening, and then we'll stay in touch. And the best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.